everyone. Thank you for joining us for another issue of Texas Insider TV. I'm Jim Cardle. We're joined today by Congressman Lamar Smith from Texas's 21st Congressional District, Chairman of the House Judiciary Committee up in Washington. Congressman, thank you for coming in.
Jim, good to be here as always.
You've been in a couple times before. We've talked about the debt ceiling and your patent reform bill, which I want to get to in a minute.
Yes.
But real quickly, let's start and jump right in. The month of September is going to be consumed by and large up in Washington, D.C. The president's pivoted to jobs. The debt ceiling was a couple months ago. Now you folks are going to be faced with a balanced budget, spending cuts,
Correct.
All kinds of thresholds that were part of the debt ceiling.
Right.
Tell us what you're looking at and what you see in the month of September.
Well, you're right. September is Jobs Month and also Spending Cuts Month as well. And I think we are reaching close to a consensus in Congress right now that the spending has gotten so much out of control that we really need to be serious to try to get our economic house in order. And the figure that I think resonates the best and gets our attention the most is the fact that the federal government today is borrowing 42 cents on every dollar it spends. That would be like a typical family, say household income of $40,000, spending $65,000 every year on an income of $40,000. That's kind of what's going on with the federal government. You can't do it, you can't sustain it, you go bankrupt that way. And so we really do need to get our economic house in order. Another figure that shows how bad it's gotten in the last 2.5 years is the fact that our national debt, this is the amount of money that we owe, This is the burden on us and our children and our grandchildren, the national debt has increased almost 40% under this administration. You can't continue that either, so that is riveting our attention, and that's why I hope we hear no more talk about raising taxes from the administration. Taxes, not once in the history of this country, have ever created one job. I hope we get back to how do we rein the federal spending in.
So about 40% in 2.5 years, essentially, you're saying under the Obama administration. A lot of that would be stimulus. Now you folks have dealt with the debt ceiling, and there's this super committee that's been named.
Right.
Our own Texas Congressman Jeb Hensarling is part of the chairmanship of that. Do you really see, or is there enough feeling amongst your peers yet as to what the success or lack thereof will be?
Right. I think they will get the job done. Their job is to cut another $1.5 trillion in our federal spending over the next 10 years. They can't afford to fail. That's why they have to succeed. And by the way, it can be more than $1.5 trillion, but it's got to be at least that. And that's in addition to the $900 billion in cuts that we voted upon a few weeks ago. That together is $2.4 trillion. Just to put that in perspective, our budget this year is $3.4 trillion. So we're proposing cutting almost a whole year's worth of a budget over the next 10 years, which is not enough, but it's a start. It's going the right direction.
So regardless of what we'll hear and see in the media about there being such a partisan rancor, so to speak, or a makeup of the committee, it's do or die, you're saying?
It is. 6 Republicans, 6 Democrats. Whatever they produce, it's an up or down vote in Congress. I do feel that they will produce at least that $1.5 trillion in spending cuts. They're just too many ripe targets for them not to come up with that, and I expect them to succeed.
And then how about, you were one of the original folks to introduce a balanced budget amendment. I suspect that may be coming up during the month of September, or maybe in October, or is that a realistic expectation? Talk about your efforts.
That is not only an expectation, that's a guarantee. The balanced budget amendments came out of the Judiciary Committee that I chair because we have a Constitution subcommittee, and that's the purview of the Constitution. We're going to actually produce 2 constitutional amendments that will go to the House floor at least in October at the latest. One is a little tougher than the other. We want to vote on both, give everybody a chance in Congress to vote on both. I'll vote in favor of both. Some members, particularly some conservative members of on the Democratic side, might vote for one or the other.
Because with 2/3, you're going to need Democrat bipartisan effort.
We have to get 2/3 vote to pass it in the House. Any constitutional amendment requires a 2/3 vote. So we need 3 Democrats to vote for it, and we're going to be lobbying them and trying to convince them and persuade them between now and October.
Okay. Congressman Lamar Smith, we're visiting with, Chairman of the House Judiciary from San Antonio, Texas 21st Congressional District. Let's turn to jobs real quick because of your role at the Judiciary Committee. You've got a patent reform bill that we've talked about before. The President has actually mentioned patent reform as a method to help jumpstart the economy. What are your outlooks for your patent reform
The
efforts?
situation with the patent reform bill, been working on it for 6 or 7 years, and we haven't updated our patent laws in close to 60 years. And
Oh my
since
gosh.
we've had everything you can think of developed since then.
There's a few things changed in 60
Internet,
years.
iPhone, everything else.
Yes.
But what we have now is a real problem. We have 1.3 patents that are pending. The average wait is 3 years. That's a real drain on the economy because you need to get these startups and the entrepreneurs patents going if you're going to have them create jobs as a basis.
And we've got how many? 1.3?
1.3 million backlog of patents.
Wow.
3-year average wait. The bill that I introduced, and there was a similar bill over in the Senate which passed. So we passed our bill, the Senate passed their bill. The Senate is actually going to turn around the House bill. Been talking to Senator Leahy, who's the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and he has said that's the first thing coming up in September. So I hope in the next 2 weeks, after all this effort, we'll be sending the patent bill to the president to sign, and we expect that to create a number of jobs. Intellectual property, high-tech companies create 40% of our increase in productivity today. They account for half of our exports. All that means jobs. That's why we need this patent bill. Protect our intellectual property and get good patents approved more quickly.
Well, that would certainly go a long way to improving the mood of the country and the outlook toward you all in Congress. Mention one more thing for me, if you would. Before we sat down here, we were talking briefly about 9/11, and then I'll let you go because I know your time's valuable. But 10th anniversary of 9/11, you said you had a personal story about when you were driving to the congressional offices in D.C. Just mention that.
Right. That
for some
was an
perspective.
incredible day. None of us were expecting that attack, as we all know. I was actually driving to my office. I lived out in McLean at that point. I was driving in. My air conditioner was broken in my car, so I had the windows down.
So this is McLean, Virginia, right across the Potomac from the Capitol.
Coming down was called the GW Parkway. The Pentagon is on my right. My window's down. I hear some kind of a muffled sound. I look over to the right to see what's going on, and within seconds I start seeing this black smoke coming up.
Really?
On next to the Pentagon, the building itself. And what occurred to me was, one, that smoke is awfully close to the Pentagon. That's kind of strange and unusual. Two, it's black smoke. Wood smoke is white. Black smoke is chemicals. And I was saying to myself, what are the chemicals doing right next to the Pentagon?
You heard no plane, no.
No, hadn't heard
sign
anything, and hadn't heard anything on the radio or anything like
Okay.
that. 10 minutes later, I drive into the Rayburn office building where my office is located, and I'm stopped by the Capitol Hill Police, as is every car now going into the building. And they said, we have just been hit again. The terrorist, or I don't know if they used the word terrorist, but they have hit the Pentagon. And I said, is that what I just saw a few minutes ago when I saw the smoke coming up by it? And they said yes. So I knew that I'd literally witnessed the Pentagon within seconds after the plane had gone into it. At the time, I was on the Judiciary Committee, but at the time I was chairman of the Crime Subcommittee of the Judiciary Committee.
Which dealt with some of the security measures
Which dealt
subsequently,
with all the
correct?
security measures at that point, including the Patriot Act and all the related legislation. So here I am, the chairman of the subcommittee, and in the next 6 weeks, the subcommittee and the full Judiciary Committee processes 3 bills, a lot of it put together in the form of the Patriot Act, and it becomes law 6 weeks later. Usually it would take years to pass any legislation. Here we are passing major legislation in a few weeks to respond to the terrorist attack. So I happen to be in the middle of it all as chairman of the crime subcommittee that processed the legislation that resulted from the terrorist attack that I had actually witnessed. Another result of that event was when they formed the new Homeland Security Committee. I was appointed to the Homeland Security Committee. Now I'm second in seniority on it, in fact. And so I've never forgotten what I saw, and I'm continuing to try to help prevent terrorist attacks from occurring.
Congressman, one final thing, jumping back to jobs, if I can. There's a national mood, or in particular the president in the White House we heard of during your August recess, that you, Congressman, were going to be back in your district. You were going to be hearing from your constituents about how it was Congress's fault that the economy had gone south. Most polls show that they blame the White House. There's not confidence. There's concerns about the stimulus.
Yeah.
And in fact, it should be the White House that is listening to the people to talk about tax cut and less spending, which is correct in your
But this is the
perception.
president's economy. It's his unemployment. When he took office, unemployment was 7.6%. It's gone up to 9.1%. When he tried to get members of Congress to vote for his so-called stimulus plan, $800+ billion, we were told that was going to keep unemployment below 8%.
It's never been below 8% since.
Yeah, it's never been below 8% since. And as a result of passing that stimulus plan, we've lost 2 million more private sector jobs. There have been 100,000 more government jobs created, but that's not what the American people wanted. They wanted the private sector jobs. So I hope the president will start listening to some of us in Congress and say, look, we need to stop the excessive government spending. We need to stop the increase in taxes. They've never created a single job in the history of this country. And I hope the president is learning from his mistakes. We'll see in the next few days what he can come up with for a jobs agenda. We have our jobs agenda, and we need to promote it. It's keep tax low. It's give investment tax credits to small businesses. It's rein in the excessive government spending, stop the borrowing. That's a drag on the economy. It's like having a ball and chain on the economy, all this excessive borrowing and the increase in the deficit and the increase in debt. Bring that down and unloose the free market system and give incentives to small businesses who create 2/3 of the new jobs in America and make life easier on them. Fewer taxes, less burdens, put them back to work.
Speaking of going back to work, we're going to let you go back to work,
Okay.
Congressman. Thank you again for coming in. Folks, be sure and tune back to Texas Insider TV when we'll have you back, Congressman Smith.